All right, so this is pretty insane. A millionaire con woman, 57 years old, is accused of bilking U.S. Army out of over $100 million by stealing cash from military youth programs and splurging it on 31 homes worth up to...
One Janet Yamanaka Mello. Janet Yamanaka Mello seemed like the perfect employee. 57 years old, originally from Guam, she'd built what looked like a solid, respectable career as a financial program manager at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio. Her position with the U.S. Army Installation Management Command put her in charge of something genuinely important: the G9 section that handled morale, welfare, and recreation programs specifically for child and youth services. In other words, she was supposed to be helping military families, helping their kids. Think about what that means for a moment. When a soldier deploys to Afghanistan or Iraq, when a parent serves overseas for months at a time, they need to know their children back home are being taken care of. They need programs, activities, support systems. That's what Janet's office was supposed to provide. She had financial authority over grant programs funded by the Army, Navy, and Air Force. She had years, decades, really, of accumulated trust from her supervisors. Everyone believed in her. Why wouldn't they? She showed up to work every day at the military installation. She processed paperwork. She attended meetings. She looked like every other dedicated civil servant working to support military families. And she had access to millions of dollars in grant funding meant specifically for children. But here's what makes your stomach turn. What makes this case so much worse than just numbers on a page? Janet wasn't helping anyone. While military families deployed overseas, while children waited for programs that would give them support and activities and some sense of normalcy, while their parents served in war zones, while mothers and fathers sacrificed everything for this country, Janet was building an empire of luxury that would make royalty jealous. Her victim wasn't just the U.S. Army at Joint Base San Antonio, Fort Sam Houston. Her victims were military children and families worldwide who should have benefited from the 4-H Military Partnership Grant Program. This wasn't some abstract government account. This was money meant to help the kids of deployed soldiers. Kids who were already dealing with the stress of having a parent in a combat zone. Kids who needed structured activities and support while their families navigated deployment after deployment. Instead of helping them, Janet created something called Child Health and Youth Lifelong Development. CHYLD for short. The name itself is manipulative genius when you think about it. It sounds legitimate, doesn't it? It sounds exactly like the kind of organization that would help military kids. It sounds wholesome, trustworthy, like something you'd want your tax dollars funding. That's what she wanted everyone to think. That's what she needed everyone to believe for her scheme to work. CHYLD was fake. Completely, entirely, thoroughly fake. It existed for one purpose only: to receive grant funds that Janet would then steal. The organization had no staff, no programs, no facilities, no services whatsoever. It was a name on paperwork and a UPS store mailbox. That's it. From December 2016 through August 2023, nearly 7 full years, she ran this scheme with chilling, methodical precision. The process went like this. She'd submit false paperwork through her official position, claiming that CHYLD provided services to military families. She described programs for children, support groups for struggling parents, educational opportunities, recreation activities, sports leagues, after-school programs, all the things military kids actually needed. None of it was real. She-LD provided 0 actual services. Not one single child benefited. Not one family received help. Not one program ever existed outside of Janet's fraudulent grant applications. She forged her supervisor's digital signature multiple times to make the applications look legitimate, then sent in grant requests like clockwork. Think about that for a second. She was stealing her supervisor's identity, a supervisor who trusted her, to commit fraud against the United States military. And she did it over and over and over again. The mechanics were disturbingly simple, which is probably why it worked for so long. She'd submit a grant application through her position of authority. The approval would come through. After all, why would anyone question a trusted financial manager who'd been there for years, who'd processed legitimate grants before, who worked in the same office handling real programs? The check would arrive at a UPS store mailbox she'd rented near San Antonio. She'd take that check, money meant for military children, and deposit it into her personal account. Then she'd wait a few weeks and do it again, and again, and again. She repeated this process 49 times over a 6-year period. 49 separate thefts from military children. Let that sink in. This wasn't one moment of weakness. This wasn't a desperate act in a crisis. This was 49 deliberate, calculated thefts from some of the most vulnerable families in America. She requested $117 million in total. The amount she actually received? $108,917,749. Over $100 million meant for military kids, gone, stolen, used to fund a lifestyle so excessive it eventually exposed her. Now here's where the story shifts from infuriating to absolutely jaw-dropping. Janet didn't steal this money and hide it away in offshore accounts. She didn't sock it away for retirement. She didn't even try to be subtle about spending it. She spent it lavishly, excessively, with the kind of reckless abandon that makes you wonder if she thought she was genuinely untouchable. Or maybe she just didn't care anymore. Maybe when you're stealing over $100 million, you lose all sense of reality. She bought over 80 vehicles. Let me repeat that. 80. Vehicles, Maseratis, Mercedes, a 1954 Corvette, a Ferrari Fratelli motorcycle, luxury cars that cost more than most people's houses, and she kept buying them. When federal agents eventually executed a search warrant on her properties, you know what they found? Vehicles with dead batteries, cars that hadn't been driven in so long, they wouldn't even start anymore. The batteries had completely died from disuse. She was buying luxury cars faster than she could physically drive them. She was accumulating vehicles the way some people collect stamps, except each stamp cost 6 figures and was purchased with money stolen from military children. But the vehicles weren't even the worst part. On December 4th, 2022, Janet walked into jewelry stores. We're talking high-end jewelry stores, and spent $923,000 in one day. Not over a month, not throughout the holiday season. One single day, she dropped nearly $1 million on jewelry. Think about what you could do with $923,000. You could buy a house. You could fund college educations for multiple kids. You could change lives. Janet spent it on jewelry, in one day, while military children waited for programs that never came. By the time investigators caught her, she owned over 1,500 pieces of jewelry. 1,500 pieces? Who needs 1,500 pieces of jewelry? Someone who's stolen so much money, they literally don't know what to do with it anymore. Someone who's lost all connection to reality and what money actually means to normal people. She'd also purchased 31 properties across the country valued at $23 million. 31 properties. Think about that for a moment. Most Americans struggle to afford one home. Janet had 31 properties spread across the United States, all purchased with money that was supposed to help children of deployed soldiers. Some of these properties were in Texas. Others were scattered across different states. Investment properties, vacation homes, real estate she'd never even visit. All of this while she was supposed to be living on her government salary, somewhere in the $80,000 range, maybe $90,000 with her years of service. Let's be generous and say she was making $100,000. That's still a very comfortable income. But it's not buy 31 properties and 80 cars money. It's not spend nearly $1 million on jewelry in one afternoon money. The disconnect should have been obvious to anyone paying attention. And here's where her small mistake comes in. The one small error that toppled her entire empire. Janet's penchant for extravagance, as federal prosecutors delicately called it, is what exposed her. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division started noticing something odd about this Army financial manager. They do what's called lifestyle analysis. They look at what people own, what they spend, and compare it to their reported income. When those numbers don't match up, they investigate. Janet's numbers didn't just fail to match up. They were laughably, impossibly inconsistent. This woman's reported income was nowhere near enough to support the lifestyle she was living. Not even close. Not in the same universe. When you're buying nearly $1 million in jewelry in a single day, but your annual salary is $80,000, people notice. Well, the right people notice. The kind of people with badges and the authority to get search warrants. Federal agents started digging. They pulled her tax returns. They traced her property purchases. They found the vehicles. And they discovered something that tells you everything you need to know about how out of control this had gotten. When agents executed search warrants and found all those vehicles, many of them had been sitting unused for so long the batteries had completely died. Dead batteries on luxury cars worth hundreds of thousands of dollars because she'd bought more cars than she could possibly use. The disconnect between her modest government salary and her multi-million-dollar spending spree triggered a full investigation. Once they started looking, really looking, the house of cards collapsed fast. She hadn't even bothered to report this income on her taxes for 2017, 2019, 2020, 2021, or 2022. 5 consecutive years of tax fraud on top of the theft itself. She was depositing millions of dollars into her accounts and just not reporting it, as if the IRS wouldn't notice. The evidence was overwhelming. The grant applications with forged signatures, the fake charity that provided zero services, the UPS store mailbox where all the checks arrived, the bank deposits, the property purchases, the vehicle titles, the jewelry receipts. All of it is documented. All of it traceable. all of it adding up to over $100 million stolen from military children. By March 7th, 2024, Janet Yamanaka Mello stood in federal court and pleaded guilty to 5 counts of mail fraud and 5 counts of filing false tax returns. There was no trial, no defense. The evidence was too overwhelming. When she appeared before U.S. District Judge Xavier Rodriguez on July 23, 2024, there was no mercy in that courtroom, no sympathy. The judge sentenced her to 180 months, that's 15 full years, in federal prison. She'll also serve 3 years of supervised release. After that, assuming she survives 15 years behind bars, she'll be 72 years old when she gets out, if she gets out. The restitution order? $108.9 million to the Army, plus an additional $31 million to the IRS for all the tax fraud. She owes nearly $140 million that she'll never be able to pay back. The properties will be seized. The vehicles will be auctioned. The jewelry will be sold. And it still won't come close to covering what she stole. Today, Janet Yamanaka Mello sits in federal prison camp Bryan in Texas. You might recognize that facility. It's become famous lately as the prison holding Ghislaine Maxwell, Elizabeth Holmes, and Jen Shaw. It's where wealthy women who committed massive frauds go to serve their time. She'll be there until she's 72 years old, assuming she serves her full sentence. 15 years to think about those 49 fraudulent grant applications. 15 years to reflect on the military children who never got the programs they deserved. 15 years to wonder if the 80 cars and 1,500 pieces of jewelry were worth it. As U.S. Attorney Jaime Esparza said in his statement after sentencing, rather than $109 million in federal funds going to the care of military children throughout the world, she selfishly stole that money to buy extravagant houses, more than 80 vehicles, and over 1,500 pieces of jewelry. He could have added, while military families deployed, while children struggled with absent parents, while soldiers served in combat zones trusting their kids would be taken care of, Janet Yamanaka Mello betrayed all of them. She looked at money meant for the children of American heroes and saw only an opportunity to buy her 31st house and her 81st car. That's not a financial crime. That's not even just fraud. That's betrayal at the deepest, most fundamental level. That's taking advantage of families who sacrifice everything for this country. That's stealing from children whose parents are in harm's way serving America. That's looking at the most vulnerable among us and seeing only dollar signs. And now she'll spend 15 years in federal prison thinking about it, thinking about every single one of those 49 fraudulent grant applications. Every check she deposited, every car she bought, every piece of jewelry she collected while military kids went without programs they desperately needed. But wait until you hear about the 74-year-old grandmother who stole for 22 years without getting caught. Where are you watching this from? What time is it where you are? Let us know. Drop your location in the comments. 2. Barbara Chalmers. Barbara Chalmers was 74 years old when federal prosecutors finally caught her. 74. A grandmother. A bookkeeper who'd spent decades in a position of trust, working for one of Dallas's most prominent families. She wasn't some young hustler trying to make a quick score. She was a woman who'd built her entire career on reliability, trustworthiness, and access to some of the most important financial accounts in Texas. For over 2 decades, everyone believed in her completely. The Collins family trusted her with everything. James M. Collins had been a successful businessman and U.S. congressman who served from 1968 to 1983. After he died in 1989, his family continued operating his business empire, Collins American Capital Corp., International Family Investors Ltd., and the James M. Collins Foundation. That foundation, it was a charitable organization dedicated to improving lives in the Dallas community. Real charity work, real impact. The kind of legacy a congressman would be proud of. Barbara Chalmers had financial roles in all these entities, every single one. She had signatory authority over the family's bank accounts. She processed checks. She handled tax paperwork. She managed cash flow. The family didn't just trust her, they depended on her. She was the person who kept their financial world running smoothly while they focused on business decisions and charitable work. It was the position of ultimate trust. So naturally, she used that trust to rob them, blind, starting at least as early as 2012. Though investigators believe it likely began much earlier, Barbara wrote herself checks from the family accounts. 175 fraudulent checks that they could prove. She'd write the check, sign it with her authorized signature, and deposit it into her personal accounts. Sometimes the checks were small enough not to trigger immediate attention. Sometimes they were massive. Over 22 years, she stole at least $29 million. $29 million from a family that trusted her, from a charitable foundation meant to help the Dallas community. And here's what really shows you Barbara's mindset. She used over $25 million of that stolen money to fund her own construction business where she served as president. Think about that. She wasn't just stealing to live large, though she certainly did that too. She was using stolen charity funds to build her own business empire, while the Collins Foundation struggled to fulfill its charitable mission. Barbara was investing their money in her own ventures. The cover-up was methodical. She provided false paperwork to tax preparers, carefully misstating the year-end cash-on-hand numbers for the various accounts she was draining. When you control the books, it's surprisingly easy to make money disappear, at least for a while. She concealed her theft from multiple accounts simultaneously, moving money around like a financial shell game. But then Dorothy Dan Collins Torbert died. Dorothy was Collins's wife, and she'd owned and managed the family's corporate entities for years after her husband's death. As long as Dorothy was alive and running things, no one else really dug into the bank statements. Dorothy trusted Barbara. Why would she question her bookkeeper of 2 decades? When Dorothy died and her descendants took over ownership of the family businesses, they did what any responsible new owners would do. They reviewed the bank statements. And that's when they found several alarming red flags involving Chalmers. Dozens of unauthorized checks written to Barbara in just the 2 years before Dorothy's death. Those checks alone totaled over $5.7 million. The family immediately filed a lawsuit in 2021 and contacted federal authorities. The investigation revealed the staggering truth. This wasn't just a recent theft. The scheme dated back at least to 2012, and likely much earlier. 22 years of systematic embezzlement. 22 years of checks written to herself while the family trusted her completely. 22 years of false paperwork and doctored books. Barbara's small mistake? Simply this: the one person who never questioned her died. As long as Dorothy Torbert managed everything, Barbara's theft remained hidden in plain sight. The moment new eyes looked at the accounts, really looked, the red flags were everywhere. The death of the one person who had complete faith in her became her exposure. On December 29, 2022, Barbara Chalmers pleaded guilty in the Eastern District of Texas to 1 count of money laundering. She faces a maximum of 10 years in federal prison. She's agreed to pay restitution of over $29 million. Money she almost certainly doesn't have, given that she spent most of it. As of now, her sentencing date hasn't been scheduled yet. The judge will determine her final sentence. But here's what bothers me most about Barbara's case. She wasn't young and desperate. She wasn't facing some crisis that pushed her into crime. She was 74 years old with a long career, presumably some retirement savings, and the respect of a prominent family. She chose to steal from a charitable foundation, an organization trying to do good in the world, for 22 years. While Dallas community programs that could have received funding went without, Barbara was building her construction empire with stolen money. 22 years? That's longer than most people's entire careers. That's a generation. That's how long Barbara Chalmers betrayed the Collins family's trust, stole from charitable causes, and got away with it. Until the one person who never questioned her was gone. Can you believe she got away with this for 22 years? 3. Tamara Starks. Tamara Starks had a brand. At 42 years old, this Mansfield, Texas woman called herself the real tax boss of Texas. Her social media bio made it clear: real tax boss of Texas, service bureau, professional tax software, credit repair, and biz consultant. She ran Site Capital Consulting LLC with her husband, a tax preparation service that handled returns for clients across the area. She also owned Treasure Chest Virgin Hair Company, a beauty studio in Arlington. By all appearances, Tamara was a successful entrepreneur, juggling multiple businesses. She was active on Facebook, constantly posting about her work, her success, and her lifestyle. The tax boss branding was everywhere. She projected confidence, expertise, and legitimacy. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit and the government rolled out the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, designed to help struggling small businesses survive, Tamara saw an opportunity. Just not the kind of opportunity the government intended. The PPP was part of the CARES Act, a program specifically created to save jobs during the pandemic. Small businesses were dying. Employees were being laid off by the millions. The PPP offered forgivable loans to help companies keep workers on payroll. The money came from the U.S. Small Business Administration, funded by taxpayer dollars, meant to be a lifeline during an unprecedented crisis. Over 100 applicants who came to Tamara for help trusted that she'd use her tax expertise to legitimately secure their PPP loans. Instead, from May 2020 to May 2021, Tamara Starks orchestrated a massive fraud scheme. She created fraudulent PPP loan applications, packed with false payroll information and fake tax documentation. Some applications were for companies owned by her and her husband. Others were for people who came to her for help. She submitted over 100 PPP loan applications requesting approximately $8.5 million. She actually received $4.5 million. Here's how the scheme worked. Once the fraudulent loans were funded, Tamara would direct the recipients to set up completely fake payrolls through third-party vendors. This made the PPP funds appear to be used legitimately for employee wages, which was the requirement for loan forgiveness. But these payrolls were fiction. The employees would then give Tamara money back from these fake paychecks. She'd use the PPP funds for personal expenses while coaching others on how to defraud the program. And for her services in securing these fraudulent loans, recipients paid Tamara a fee. Think about what this means. While real small businesses were desperately trying to survive, while actual employees were losing their jobs and their livelihoods, Tamara was exploiting a pandemic relief program. She was coaching people on how to commit fraud against the federal government. She was taking taxpayer money meant to save jobs and using it for personal enrichment. Over 100 fraudulent applications. $4.5 million stolen from a program designed to help people survive a national emergency. But here's where Tamara's story gets truly unbelievable. Her small mistake wasn't some sophisticated investigation that caught a financial discrepancy. Her mistake was that she couldn't stop posting on social media. Even as federal investigators closed in, even as she knew she was facing serious charges, Tamara kept flaunting her lifestyle on Facebook. The tax boss brand was too important to her. The image of success was everything. Then came January 12, 2025, just 4 days before her sentencing hearing. Most people in Tamara's position would be lying low, consulting with lawyers, preparing for prison. Not Tamara. She posted on Facebook, "I am never ashamed of anything I've done or faced. I handle every challenge with pride and dignity, never compromising my integrity." Wait, what? Never compromising her integrity? Days before being sentenced for defrauding the federal government out of millions during a pandemic? The audacity is breathtaking. Federal prosecutors had already proven she'd submitted over 100 fraudulent loan applications. She'd already pleaded guilty to wire fraud. And she's posting about her integrity on social media. That post encapsulates everything about Tamara's downfall. Her social media presence, the constant bragging, the lifestyle posts, the tax boss branding, drew attention to the massive disconnect between her legitimate business income and her actual spending. When investigators started looking into her tax business and saw the discrepancies, the fraudulent PPP applications came to light. On September 2024, Tamara pleaded guilty to wire fraud. When she appeared before U.S. District Judge Mark Pittman in the Northern District of Texas on January 16, 2025, just 4 days after that Facebook post, the judge showed no sympathy. 86 months. That's 7+ years in federal prison. The judge also ordered her to pay restitution of $4,476,523.73. So the real tax boss of Texas, who handled every challenge with pride and dignity while never compromising her integrity, is now handling a 7-year prison sentence. She stole from a pandemic relief program while people were dying. She coached others to commit fraud while small businesses were collapsing. She exploited a national crisis for personal gain, and She posted about her integrity on Facebook 4 days before sentencing. Some people just can't help themselves. Coming up, the woman who stole for 5 years, and nobody noticed until one audit changed everything. 4. Tanisha Adderley. Tanisha Adderley didn't look like a criminal. At 51 years old, she was exactly the kind of employee companies prize. Experienced, responsible, trustworthy. She'd worked for a health and human services technology solutions company for several years, steadily building her way up to a position with high-level access. The company specialized in recovering fees that had been overpaid by their clients, then remitting refunds via wire transfers. It's detailed, careful work that requires someone with financial authority and good judgment. Tanisha had both, or so everyone thought. She had access to the fund's recovery bank account. She was responsible for obtaining approvals and processing fee refunds. When a client was owed money, Tanisha would review the case, get the proper approvals, and wire the funds to the client's account. The company relied completely on her judgment. They trusted her to do the right thing with their money and their clients' money. For 5 years, from 2019 to 2023, Tanisha betrayed that trust systematically. She prepared false approvals, documents that made it look like legitimate refunds were being processed. Then she'd wire the money to non-vendor business bank accounts. What does that mean? It means the accounts weren't connected to any actual client or business partner. They were accounts controlled by Tanisha herself. The scheme was elegant in its simplicity. She had the authority to approve wire transfers. She had access to process those transfers. She had the knowledge to create paperwork that looked legitimate. So she'd create a false approval, wire company money to her own accounts, and file the paperwork to make it look like a routine refund. Month after month, year after year, the company had no idea. Over 5 full years, Tanisha fraudulently obtained $3,700,000. $3.7 million wired directly from her employer's accounts into accounts she controlled. Not once or twice as a desperate act. Not even a dozen times. This was systematic theft spanning 5 years. She created fake approval documentation for every single fraudulent transfer. She concealed it through false paperwork that made the missing money look like legitimate business expenses. Think about what has to happen for this kind of fraud to work for 5 years. Nobody questioned her approvals. Nobody cross-checked her wire transfers. Nobody noticed that millions of dollars were flowing to accounts that had nothing to do with actual clients. The company's internal controls failed completely. Tanisha knew that. She exploited it. But here's the thing about electronic transfers. They leave a trail. Every wire has a record. Every approval has a digital footprint. Every transfer can be traced. When the company finally conducted an audit in 2023, the pattern emerged immediately. Millions of dollars going to the same sets of accounts. Approvals that didn't match up with actual clients. Wire transfers that made no business sense. The company contacted federal authorities. This wasn't a simple embezzlement case anymore. This was systematic wire fraud involving millions of dollars. The United States Secret Service got involved. Yes, the Secret Service, most people don't realize they investigate financial crimes, not just protect the president. Their Dallas field office launched a full investigation. The electronic trail exposed everything. 5 years of fraudulent wire transfers, all meticulously documented in the company's financial systems. Tanisha's carefully maintained false paperwork didn't matter anymore. The wire records told the truth. In September 2023, federal prosecutors charged Tanisha Adderley via criminal information with wire fraud. 2 months later, in November 2023, she pleaded guilty before U.S. Magistrate Judge Irma Carrillo Ramirez. There was no trial. The evidence was overwhelming. By July 3, 2024, Tanisha stood before the judge for sentencing. 51 months. That's 4+ years in federal prison. The judge also ordered her to pay restitution of $3,769,401.90. Nearly the full amount she'd stolen. Here's what makes Tanisha's case particularly frustrating. She didn't gamble the money away. She didn't have some addiction or crisis. For 5 solid years, she systematically stole from her employer, a company that helped people recover money they were owed. The irony is brutal. They were in the business of making clients whole after financial errors, and their own employee was stealing millions while processing those refunds. 5 years, 60 months of monthly paychecks, while also wiring herself millions on the side. 5 years of coming into work, greeting coworkers, attending meetings, and systematically robbing the company blind. The audacity of showing up every single day to steal is staggering. Tanisha's small mistake? Simply this. Audits happen. Internal reviews happen. And when they do, electronic wire transfer records don't lie. The Secret Service investigation uncovered every single fraudulent transfer. The pattern was impossible to deny once someone actually looked. Now she's got 4 years in federal prison to think about those wire transfers. 4 years to reflect on how she threw away her career, her reputation, and her freedom for $3.7 million she'll never get to keep. 4 years to wonder if it was worth it? The answer, obviously, is no. 5. Shantelle Hawkins. Shantelle Hawkins was 43 years old and running multiple businesses with her relatives in DeSoto, Texas, just south of Dallas. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2020 and businesses started collapsing, the federal government rolled out the Paycheck Protection Program as a lifeline. The PPP was designed to help struggling companies keep employees on payroll when revenues dried up overnight. It was meant to prevent mass layoffs, keep businesses alive, and protect the economy during an unprecedented crisis. The Small Business Administration administered the program, distributing billions in forgivable loans. If you use the money correctly, primarily for payroll, the loan would be forgiven. You'd never have to pay it back. It was essentially free money from taxpayers to help businesses and workers survive. While some business owners agonized over whether to accept PPP funds even when they qualified, others saw it differently. Shantelle Hawkins saw an opportunity. Between May 2020 and March 2021, while ICU beds filled up and small businesses shuttered permanently, Shantelle conspired to submit 17 fraudulent PPP loan applications. Not 1 or 2, 17. These applications were submitted on behalf of companies she or her relatives owned or controlled. Every single application contained false information, fake payroll numbers, fraudulent tax documentation. The SBA used this fabricated data to calculate loan amounts believing the applications were legitimate. Shantelle obtained over $1.8 million in fraudulent PPP funds, while actual small business owners were desperately trying to keep their doors open, while real employees were losing jobs and health insurance. Shantelle was collecting pandemic relief money based on lies. And what did she do with this money that was supposed to save jobs? She paid off her 2015 Maserati Ghibli luxury car, a Maserati, with pandemic relief funds meant for struggling businesses. But that wasn't enough. She also purchased multiple residential properties in the greater Dallas area, investment properties, real estate purchases, all funded with PPP loans that she'd obtained through fraud while the economy burned. Think about what was happening in America during this time period. People were dying by the thousands every day. Businesses were closing permanently. Unemployment hit levels not seen since the Great Depression. And Shantelle was buying property and paying off her Maserati with money meant to help companies survive. The disconnect is staggering. While her neighbors struggled to pay rent, while local businesses hung permanently closed signs, while families depleted their savings, Shantelle was building a real estate portfolio with stolen pandemic funds. She wasn't some desperate business owner trying to survive. She was a fraud artist exploiting a national crisis. Here's the thing about buying luxury cars and properties with government funds. It leaves a crystal clear paper trail. When you pay off a Maserati with a PPP loan, that transaction is documented. When you purchase multiple properties with pandemic relief funds, those deeds are public record. The luxury car and the real estate purchases were completely inconsistent with legitimate business needs. A small business keeping employees on payroll doesn't need to buy investment properties. A struggling company doesn't pay off the owner's luxury car. Federal investigators trace the money. The PPP funds flowed directly to Maserati payments and property purchases. There was no attempt to actually use the money for payroll. No employees benefited. No jobs were saved. The 17 fraudulent applications existed solely to enrich Shantelle Hawkins, while she and her relatives pretended to run struggling businesses. On October 8th, 2024, Shantelle pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud. By June 25th, 2025, extremely recently, she stood before a judge in the Northern District of Texas for sentencing. 41 months. That's 3 years and 5 months in federal prison. The judge also ordered her to pay restitution of more than $1.8 million and to forfeit all the residences she'd purchased with the fraud proceeds. The property forfeiture is separate from the restitution, meaning she loses the houses and still owes the money. So Shantelle's real estate empire built on pandemic fraud? Gone. Her Maserati paid off with stolen funds? That payment will be clawed back through restitution. Her freedom? Gone for 3+ years? And for what? For exploiting a pandemic that killed over 1 million Americans. For stealing from a program designed to save jobs and businesses during the worst public health crisis in a century. The small business owners who legitimately struggled during COVID, who made agonizing decisions about layoffs, who emptied their savings to keep their companies alive. Those people played by the rules. They suffered. Meanwhile, Shantelle Hawkins drove her Maserati and collected rental income from properties purchased with stolen pandemic funds. Until the paper trail caught up with her. Until investigators followed the money from the fraudulent PPP applications to the luxury car payment and the property purchases, until a federal judge sentenced her to 3 years and 5 months behind bars. Crime doesn't pay, especially when you're buying a Maserati during a pandemic with money meant to save people's jobs. 6. Christiane Kathleen Irwin. Christiane Kathleen Irwin was 44 years old and working at one of Dallas's prestigious law firms, Simon Greenstone Panettiere, a firm specializing in personal injury cases. Her title was controller, a position that sounds important because it is. Controllers oversee financial operations. They manage budgets. They ensure accuracy in financial reporting. Most critically for the story, Christiane was responsible for submitting payroll each week to the firm's payroll vendor, Automatic Data Processing Inc., better known as ADP. Every week, Christiane would submit payroll information for herself and all the firm's other employees to ADP. The system was straightforward. She'd enter the hours, salaries, and any bonuses. Then ADP would process everything and transfer money from the firm's bank account to each employee's account. It was an automated system designed for efficiency. The law firm relied entirely on Christiane's accuracy. Why wouldn't they? She was the controller. This was literally her job. Christiane's actual salary was approximately $140,000 annually. A very comfortable income, especially when you factor in bonuses that sometimes reached as high as $50,000. She was well compensated for her work, but apparently it wasn't enough. From 2019 to 2021, Christiane falsely inflated her salary in every payroll submission she made to ADP. Here's the brilliance and the audacity of her scheme. She had complete control over what numbers went to ADP. The firm trusted her to submit accurate information. ADP trusted that the information was accurate. So every 2 weeks, like clockwork, ADP would transfer inflated amounts from the law firm's bank account directly to Christiane's personal account. The law firm had no idea they were paying their controller far more than her authorized salary. The indictment detailed specific instances that show just how bold Christiane became. In March 2018, she inflated her payroll by $30,836.67. In November 2019, she inflated it by $36,011.77. By March 2020, she was inflating single paychecks by $49,375. Think about that last one. Her legitimate bi-weekly paycheck should have been around $5,000, maybe more with bonuses. She was adding amounts that nearly doubled or tripled her legitimate pay. And ADP just processed it automatically, trusting the information was correct. Over 3 years, Christiane took more than $1,480,000 from the law firm, $1.48 million in fraudulent payroll payments. She used the money to enhance her personal lifestyle, luxury vehicles, multiple vacations, all the trappings of success. Meanwhile, her law firm partners had no idea their controller was systematically robbing them through their own payroll system. The cover-up was built into the scheme. As controller, Christiane had access to the firm's financial records. She could adjust how things were categorized. She could create entries that explained discrepancies. She was the person responsible for catching financial irregularities. which meant she was uniquely positioned to hide her own theft. The very system meant to ensure accuracy and prevent fraud enabled her to steal for 3 years. But eventually someone looked closer. Maybe it was an external audit. Maybe it was a partner reviewing finances more carefully than usual. Maybe it was a discrepancy that couldn't be explained away. However it happened, the law firm discovered that their payroll expenses were far higher than they should be. When they started investigating, Christiane's inflated payments emerged immediately. The FBI's Dallas field office took over the investigation. In March 2022, a grand jury indicted Christiane Kathleen Irwin on 3 counts of wire fraud. On April 20th, 2022, she pleaded not guilty. For 16 months, she maintained her innocence. Then on August 23rd, 2023, she changed her plea to guilty. The evidence was overwhelming. U.S. District Judge Brantley Starr sentenced her on August 21st, 2024, 50 months. That's 4+ years in federal prison. The judge also ordered restitution of $1,483,008.56. Essentially every dollar she'd stolen. Here's what makes Christiane's case so particularly galling. She was stealing from a law firm. These are attorneys who understand fraud, who prosecute financial crimes, who knows exactly how the legal system works. And their own controller was inflating her salary through their payroll system for 3 years. The irony would be funny if it weren't so infuriating. Christiane's small mistake was simply this: automated systems work perfectly until someone actually reviews them. The ADP payroll system processed her fraud flawlessly for 3 years, never questioning the inflated amounts, because systems don't question. They process. But the moment a human being looked at the total payroll expenses and wondered why they were so high, the scheme unraveled. Now Christiane has 4 years in federal prison to reflect on whether those luxury vehicles and vacations were worth it. 4 years to think about how she threw away a prestigious position at a respected law firm. 4 years to wonder if she really thought she'd never get caught inflating her own salary as the person in charge of payroll. The answer was always going to be no. The only question was when someone would finally look. 7. She-Daria Owens-Sharp. She-Daria Owens-Sharp was 42 years old and had worked her way up to operations manager at an IT staffing service company in Irving, Texas. 7 years she'd been there, from April 2012 to March 2019. 7 years of steady employment, building trust, taking on more responsibility. The company specialized in placing IT professionals at client sites, important work that required careful attention to payroll and employee compensation. As operations manager, She-Daria had oversight of the payroll process. She had access to the company's financial systems. She held a position of trust with employee compensation. When you're responsible for making sure people get paid correctly, the company depends completely on your honesty. Employees depend on you. The entire system only works if the person managing it operates with integrity. For all 7 years She-Daria worked there, she operated with something else: greed. Her scheme was clever and systematic. She'd request paper paychecks for employees who were already receiving direct deposit. The employees themselves had no idea these paper checks existed. They'd get their direct deposit as usual, never knowing their operations manager had ordered a second payment method. When the paper checks arrived, She-Daria would alter them. She'd carefully remove the employee's name and replace it with her own. Then she'd deposit these altered checks into her personal bank account. The employees got their normal direct deposit. The company thought it was paying employees via paper check, and She-Daria was depositing both, collecting money meant for other people while they remained completely unaware. 376 times. That's how many paper checks She-Daria altered over 7 years. Not once or twice in a moment of desperation. 376 separate acts of theft. 376 times she took a check meant for someone else, erased their name, wrote her own, and deposited it. The systematic nature of it is staggering. This wasn't an opportunistic crime. This was a 7-year operation. The total amount? More than $818,000. But She-Daria wasn't done. She also decided to give herself a raise without telling anyone. She falsely told the company's payroll vendor that she'd received a salary increase from $17 to $25 per hour. That's a nearly 50% raise. The company increased her direct deposit based on this lie, paying her $8 more per hour than she actually earned. Think about the audacity. She was already stealing through altered paper checks. But that wasn't enough. She wanted her legitimate paychecks increased too, so she lied to the payroll vendor about getting a raise. She was stealing through 2 completely different methods simultaneously. To hide all this theft, She-Daria made false entries in the company's records. She'd show payroll for people who had already left the company, ghost employees. This created paper trails that explained where the money was going. At least it explained it enough that nobody looked too closely for 7 years. The company didn't just lose the $818,000 She-Daria stole. They also paid an additional $224,000 in payroll taxes on those fraudulent checks. When you process payroll, you pay employer taxes on those wages. So the company was paying taxes on money that She-Daria was stealing. The total company loss exceeded $1 million. For 7 years, this worked. 7 years of altered checks deposited into her personal account. 7 years of fraudulent raises. 7 years of ghost employees on the payroll. Nobody noticed. Nobody questioned why employees were getting both direct deposit and paper checks. Nobody wondered why someone who'd left the company months ago was still on payroll. The internal controls failed completely. Until someone finally asked the right question. Why are employees receiving both direct deposit and paper checks? It's such a simple question. But once someone asked it, the entire scheme collapsed. When investigators started looking at those paper checks, the pattern emerged immediately. 376 altered checks, all deposited to the same account, all with the same handwriting replacing employee names with She-Daria Owens-Sharp. The FBI's Dallas field office investigated. The evidence was overwhelming. 7 years of altered checks, all meticulously documented in banking records. On April 2022, She-Daria pleaded guilty to 1 count of wire fraud. There was no trial, no defense. The check alterations spoke for themselves. U.S. District Judge Sama Lindsay sentenced her on February 8, 2023. 77 months. That's 6+ years in federal prison. The The judge also ordered restitution of $1.1 million, including both the stolen funds and the extra payroll taxes the company had paid. She-Daria's small mistake, the paper trail, every single one of those 376 altered checks left a record. Every deposit to her account was documented. Every ghost employee she created in the system could be traced. When someone finally questioned the dual payment system, 7 years of fraud unraveled in days. Now she's got 6 years in federal prison to think about those altered checks. 6 years to wonder why she thought altering 376 checks over 7 years would never be noticed. 6 years to reflect on how she threw away her career for $818,000 that she'll never get to keep. The paper trail always wins. Always. So let's add this up. 7 women across Texas. Janet Yamanaka Mello with her $109 million theft from military children. Barbara Chalmers with her 22-year embezzlement from a charitable foundation. Tamara Starks posting about her integrity days before sentencing for pandemic fraud. Tanisha Adderley's 5-year wire fraud scheme. Shantelle Hawkins paying off her Maserati with PPP funds. Christiane Irwin inflated her law firm salary for 3 years. She-Daria Owens-Sharp altering 376 paychecks over 7 years. Combined, these 7 women stole over $145 million. Together, they've been sentenced to more than 50 years in federal prison. Every single one is behind bars right now. Not one escaped. No one avoided the consequences. 7 different mistakes. But they all share one thing: the belief that they'd never get caught. The assumption that they were too clever, too careful, too important. The conviction that they could keep stealing forever as long as they were smart about it. They were wrong. Every single time they were wrong. Modern financial systems track everything. Wire transfers leave digital footprints. Check deposits and create paper trails. Property purchases are public record. Tax returns are cross-referenced with lifestyle spending. Electronic payroll systems document every payment. And eventually, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, someone looks, someone audits, someone questions, someone notices the disconnect between income and spending. That's when the house of cards collapses. That's when federal investigators get involved. That's when the FBI, the IRS, the Secret Service started tracing the money. And that's when the small mistakes expose the massive crimes. So which case shocked you the most? Was it Janet Mello spending $923,000 on jewelry in one day while stealing from military kids? Or maybe Barbara Chalmers getting away with 22 years of theft from a charitable foundation? Perhaps it was Tamara Starks posting about her integrity on Facebook 4 days before sentencing for pandemic fraud? Or Shantelle Hawkins paying off a Maserati with PPP funds while businesses collapsed? What time are you watching this right now? Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. Tell us which case made your jaw drop. These stories deserve to be shared because they're not just about crime, they're about betrayal at the deepest level, betrayal of trust, betrayal of duty, betrayal of the most vulnerable among us. Like this video if you found these cases as shocking as I did. Subscribe for more true crime content. Because unfortunately, stories like these keep happening. There's always another person who thinks they're smart enough to steal without getting caught. There's always another scheme, another fraud, another betrayal. But here's what never changes. The small mistakes always expose them. Every single time. All of them deserved better. All of them got betrayed. And all 7 women who did the betraying are now in federal prison where they'll stay for years. The small mistakes expose the massive crimes. That's not a warning, that's a promise, because in the end, crime doesn't pay, especially when you're stealing $145 million and thinking you'll never get caught. They all got caught, and they'll all pay the price